Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited today. I have two amazing guests with me, two amazing panelists. I have Melissa Moore and Roberta Blevins. They're both dear friends of mine, and I'm so excited to have them both because they're really truly experts in their area of expertise. I love Melissa. She works in the documentary world and she has a true crime story of her own. And then Roberta, she is in the MLM space and has really become the go-to person for MLMs. I know a few friends of mine that follow her just randomly and will say, "Oh, I sent this to Roberta so that she could cover." And it's just so funny because I'm like, "Oh, I know Roberta." And so I love all the connections here. I'll also have you guys both introduce yourself. But today we are going to be talking about sharing about your story in a documentary format. And I'm excited about talking about documentaries because this is something I've been in as well. I've been in several documentaries, and each time there's a different code of ethics that each person goes on. So I love these people's input today that are on my panel. And let's welcome Melissa, and then I'll welcome Roberta. Thank you guys.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So, my name is Melissa Moore, and I came forward with my story publicly in 2008 when I first went on the stage of the Dr. Phil Get Real retreat to reveal this horrible family secret, which was that my father lived a double life as the happy face serial killer. It was the first time I ever even said it out loud. So at the time in 2008, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had a business. I owned a daycare facility, and I was afraid that my clients would be terrified that I was related to a perpetrator. And so I thought I could lose my livelihood by coming forward with my story. So I went on the Get Real retreat to really talk about, like, how do I tell my kids that their grandfather is a serial killer. So I went on this Get Real retreat with 14 other individuals, and I told my secret, and I came home, and then all I got, like, thankfully, I got support and community that I never received back in 1995 when my father was arrested, because back in 95, I was in high school. And there was a lot of guilty by association. Parents didn't really know how to react, how their kids were accidentally or by proxy to me were exposed to a serial killer. So, anywho, that I'm just making a long story short. After the Get Real retreat, I decided to really face this story, face my own story and write what I remember and the trauma that I experienced. So I wrote Shattered Silence. And then fast forward to now, it's 30 years since my father's arrest. And I've worked to create the Paramount Plus scripted series, which is Happy Face, that you could watch right now on Paramount Plus. That is fictionalized, but I've also told my story in documentary form on Evil Lives Here on Discovery ID. I've done it. I've told my story in many, many formats, including podcasting, which would be Happy Face on iHeart Podcasts. So that's like a really condensed like summary of it. I guess what I should say is from telling my story, I parlayed it into helping other people tell their story. I realized I'm a storyteller and that storytelling through media is a form of advocacy. Not like something maybe you would traditionally recognize as advocacy, but it is like telling your story to help other survivors so they know that they're not alone is a form of advocacy. So that is, I guess, a summary of what I do.
I do have to add, you also work on several different documentaries. You produce different documentaries with different survivors. So there's also that.
That's true. Yeah. So this summer, what was released was the Peacock series, the Gilgo uh, Killer, The House of Secrets. And then I had a movie with Survivor, Heather Robinson, air on Lifetime in June as well. And then prior to that, I think most people probably notably know me from Gypsy Rose, The Prison Confessions, and Life After Lockup, But I also did The Life and Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson last summer too. So yeah,
Just in one summer.
I know it's kind of crazy. Kind of crazy.
And Roberta, I love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Roberta. I recognize Dr. Gigi, and it's nice to be here again. Thank you for having me. I started telling my story publicly in 2018. So, about 6 months after I got out of my pyramid scheme and kind of blew the whistle on them, the media came calling. And so I did all kinds of interviews I've been on pretty much every single podcast about cults. I've been on a lot of white collar crime podcasts and scam podcasts. I've told my story so many times. Vice came knocking. We did a small documentary with them. I think it was about a half an hour long. It's on YouTube. If you Google LuLaRoe Vice, it'll pop right up. And then that documentary actually led to a larger documentary. We did a four-part series for Amazon called Lula Rich that came out in 2021, I think. And ever since then, really actually, I think I started my podcast in was during COVID in the beginning of 2021 because I knew the documentary was coming out and I figured if I'm gonna do advocacy like Melissa is saying and telling stories and helping other people tell their stories, then I should probably do it when something big was gonna come on and like just ride that wave. And so that's exactly what I did. I started my podcast in February of 2021. The documentary came out, I think, in September of 2021, and it just kind of shot through the roof from there. We just had our 300th episode. We're in our fifth season, and we tell lots of stories, cults, fraud, scams, sometimes even true crime, multi-level marketing, pyramid schemes, all of that kind of stuff. And the documentary was amazing. I'm one of the lucky ones. I think I hear a lot of horror stories from people who tell their stories to the media where they don't have a lot of say and they don't have a lot of input. And that was one of the things that I said, if I'm going to tell my story, like I need to be portrayed as how I am. This is not a reality TV show. This is my life and this is my advocacy, and it's very important to me. And I lucked out. I got a really great producing team who also do the Shiny Happy People series, and I've gotten to work with them because of my connections to them and do fun stuff with the Shiny Happy People and kind of help expose that kind of stuff too. And season two is coming out soon. And so aside from that, I work on the backside with legislation, and I work with a kind of like a group of people who are consumer protection, anti-MLM people to help kind of change the rules in Washington, D.C. It's a long journey, but through our advocacy, a lot of MLMs have changed the way that they do things. They change their structure. They close down because they can't sustain their scam anymore. And I take it as a win. So every little step forward is great. And I do the podcast because I know when I left and I started telling my story, I encountered a lot of people, mostly just randoms in the comments, who were like, well, it's your fault. And I was like, there's no way, man. I'm like a smart person, you know? And so I educated myself on cult tactics and coercive control and gaslighting. And I gave all of these feelings names that I didn't know the names of before. And, since then, we've really just helped a lot of people tell their stories. They go on to other podcasts. I think there's a couple people, we have people that are in documentaries that come on the show as well, people that end up writing books and going through there. So I'm happy to be a part of teaching people how to share their story and, talking about that kind of stuff. So that's my story.
Beautiful. Thank you both. I really enjoyed hearing that all because sometimes when you have the person share their own story, you always get a different version from what you chat GPT'd, you know? So let's go into the personal cost of going public. What are your guys' thoughts on the emotional and psychological impact of sharing one's story? Whoever
Uh,
wants to start.
oh,
Melissa.
sure. I'll start first. I would say I work with survivors and family members of perpetrators. I'm probably pretty controversial in the sense that I have some beliefs that are not in alignment with standards of production, I would say, like the standard norm. Like I would say I firmly believe that the survivor or the person whose story they're sharing, the storyteller, that they're entitled to the same rights as the people in the room filming. And I came to that conclusion based on my own experience, and I'm gonna explain what I think they're entitled to. So basically, what I was witnessing is that in the true crime space, and I'm going to keep this in the true crime space niche, is that for so many years, they have not paid for the content. They have not paid for the storyteller to tell their story of the worst day of their life. So they'll say, producers will say, sorry, we don't pay for stories, or we don't have a budget for that. However, when they set up the room, they have producers, they have assistants, they have catering, they have a director, they have, all of these line items of staff that fill up the room, and people that you don't see post filming that are the editors. So everybody is getting a salary except for the one person who's telling their story. And then what I would hear from survivors is that they would get told, oh, they don't have a budget for this. And then they also have shame thinking this is blood money. And so I feel that, the conversation about ethical true crime, I feel like it's ethical to pay for their time to sit in the room because they've had therapy. They need a bit, they need therapy probably. They need resources to help them. They probably most likely opened their home to film, so location, rate. I mean, I could go into the business of true crime, but as far as the storyteller, I really wanted to get involved in that form too by helping them advocate for themselves to get compensated for the materials that they're sharing. So while they may not get paid for their story, they're getting paid for the materials. And then some experts get paid for their time.
Yes, thank you. And Roberta, what is your thought on emotional and psychological impact of sharing one story?
So I think it's great if you want to tell your story with the huge caveat of if you're ready. And I think a lot of people go into these stories and they're not ready. They go in, they jump in, they want to strike when the iron's hot and they're not healed. And it just kind of causes more trouble than I think it's worth for some people. I have people that'll reach out and say, I just left my MLM. I want to tell my story. Can I come on the show? And I'll kind of almost hold them back. It's not even intentional. I'm just kind of busy. And I say, oh, yeah, let's talk or let's have a couple emails back and forth. And sometimes they get busy and we don't talk for another 6 months to a year. And they email me and go, hey, I still am interested in telling my story. I'm even more prepared now. I've had a lot of time to think about things and take notes and watch TikTok videos of other survivors or read books from other survivors or watch documentaries or listen to other episodes. And they get a better sense of their story and they kind of, I don't know, kind of chip it down a little bit so it's a little more concise and a little more understanding. I think a lot of people come in really hot, and the episodes where I've done with people who come in hot tend to be a lot more chaotic even for me when I'm editing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're all over the place here. Whereas somebody who's had the time to sit down and to think about it, to take notes, to do the work, their stories are much more impactful because the people listening to it connect a lot better. It's not all over the place. And the stories that I've had that have had the most impact of like, I heard this episode and it led me to getting out or it led me to asking questions are the ones that are the most prepared and have done the work or either are like experts or something like that. So as much as I want to tell people like get out there and tell, share your story, people will come to me and they go, how do I get a documentary? I'm in an MLM that's just as crazy as LuLaRoe. How do I get into a documentary? What are your contacts? And I say, look, I didn't have a contact. They came to me because I was creating news and I was creating content and I was creating something that was intriguing enough to have somebody in the media go, well, there's something here. Like, let's look into it. So I always tell people, tell your story as you go publicly on your own page, share with things, interact with the comments, make video responses to comments, keep that conversation going, educate yourself, do the hard work. people, when you have a good story and it's packaged really nicely, people want to help you tell it versus it just being this chaotic mess of, oh my God, that happened to me too. So I think in that way, I also agree with Melissa in and having some sort of compensation. With Lula Rich, we were given like a licensing fee for using all of the videos and the pictures and everything. They said, we can't pay you, but we can give you a licensing fee and you can have a little money this way. And then they ended up for B-roll, and not a lot of people know this, but for B-roll in the documentary, you watch like leggings and clothing fall. That was all stuff they shot with leggings that they bought from me. They like called me up and they were like, we want to give you more money. And like, this is the most ethical way we can do it. Send us $500 worth of stuff that you're willing to part with to this address. And so that was another way that I was compensated. I mean, it paid a couple bills, I'm not a millionaire by any means, but it paid a couple bills. And then really honestly, the best thing that came from it was the exposure. I get people constantly who continue to find me and say, I just watched Lula Rich the other day. Oh my gosh, I'm in something just like that too. And it starts that conversation, it starts that ball rolling. And then again, we're helping survivors tell their stories and the process repeats.
Yeah, and to go back, you're absolutely right, Roberta, about everything you said. I can identify so many different documentaries that I've helped survivors go on and they weren't ready. So I know exactly what you're talking about because it takes the producers so much longer to like circle back, like to get the answer. I would say, going after compensation, like the money part, that's the fallout really, that didn't really answer your question. It was just kind of like a point that I feel is important about the space. But I would say that while you want community and you share your story for a community, you also get the hate. And so look at it from that lens, like if you're going to share your story, already be solid in your truth, like who you are as a person, as a survivor, because no matter, like, you could be the most perfect survivor and victim, like you could be all the greatest things, and then somebody will find a reason to shame you or to put you down. I recall, like, I had a TikTok that went viral that hit 13 million views on sharing a prison letter from my father. And I shared it because I was just cleaning out my office and I was like, he was in the letter, he was just with dark humor mocking me that he didn't attend my wedding and fat shaming me and saying like my husband and I've gained weight, things like that nature. But I found it kind of I don't know why I decided to share it. And I shared it and some people in the comments were like, oh, you're just like looking for pity. I was like, I'm not looking for anything. Or you're looking for your 15 minutes of fame. And no, really, I was looking for connection to just share my story. So if it resonates with someone else, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. But just know that if you do share your story, it's going to come with criticism, hate, trolls, as much as it comes with community and love, you know?
Absolutely. And following up after that, how do you deal with the exposure, especially something that comes from these documentaries with them being on major platforms? How do you deal with that aftermath? Whoever wants to answer. Roberta?
I think luckily for me, I'm it's mine's more white collar, so there's not as much tragedy. It's mostly financial, and people just want to be told they're not crazy. They just want to be like, I can't be the only one, right? Like I can't be the only person that did this. So by sharing my story and inviting people to share their story, that's like one of the things that was so important to me was like having people understand that they're not alone in this and that it's systemic and it's built this way and it's designed this way. So all of that stuff that you're feeling, like you can throw it out the window because it happened to all of us. And it really creates an amazing community. I also want to say, like, sometimes the haters are just fuel. I get a lot of haters that are like, not my company. And I'm like, all right, prove it. And it creates fuel and it creates questions that people in the comments that they're seeing and they're going, oh my God, like they can't prove it. Maybe she's right. So even that kind of stuff, like backlash, I try to make it a positive. And then a lot of times I just stay off of social media too. I'm like post and ghost.
I think that's the operating standard is post and ghost. I don't Google myself. But I mean, it's yeah, I think that the one thing that bothers me because I have thick skin now, I would say, and I have operating procedures like what Roberta has, post and ghost. But when my kids are on TikTok and they're scrolling and then they run into a TikTok about me, somebody saying something negative about me or something I created, it affects them, and that bothers me because I want to protect my kids. But I would say even then it would have to be something pretty substantial. I also don't like it when creeps reach out to my kids and message them, too. That bothers me as well. So I would say anything revolving, your extended family members. When a lot of my major stuff came out, what I didn't realize is just having standards on my social media is like to protect my extended family members. I didn't realize that I should have done a privacy audit. Like I didn't realize my family members were visible on like Facebook. And so they were getting, hit by haters and people commenting to them. So that really bothered me. So it's just like the collateral damage, to the people I love. Would be the fallout. So I would say before you go on a documentary, check your security on your social media, make sure your extended family members are not visible, and yeah, check that out. And then also, I would say one thing that I got from Call Her Daddy, I listened to a podcast that she was talking about she started going therapy and her therapist recommended that she just not even accept comments on her posts. And I was like, you can do that? Yeah, it's not great for your algorithm, but an engagement, but you can absolutely opt out of not even getting comments from people.
Yes, I've definitely had to do that before, and that was helpful regarding that situation.
Yeah, you get
Yes,
it.
yes. So, was there a moment when you guys doubted sharing your story?
Mm. I would say the pit in my stomach when I knew it was airing, or at the beginning. I would say at the very beginning when I first started telling my story, I wasn't in the emotional place I am now. But I remember when I first told my story and I knew the producer emailed me and said, okay, it's going to drop. It's going to air this date. And I remember like going to the grocery store and like looking around, like waiting for like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen. Like, and I don't know if I thought people were going to instantly know all this secret of mine now is so visibly exposed. I didn't know if people would call me out like strangers and stuff like that. But yeah, I had a pit in my stomach, just kind of bracing for like the uncertainty of what's gonna happen. Yeah.
I have had a neighbor go up to me and say, "You're the girl that stabbed that guy in the eye." And I'm like, "I'm so happy I'm moving next week."
Again, my story is so different. So for me, it was like validation and vindication, and like somebody was finally listening. And I kind of almost got to be a spokesperson for a lot of people. So when the media started coming around and asking and talking to us, I was just one of the admins of this Facebook group that had thousands of people in it who had all experienced the same thing. And none of the admins wanted to talk to the media. They're like, we nominate Roberta. So I was just like, all right, cool. I've talked to the media before. It's totally fine. So it wasn't anything that I like intentionally was like, I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to change lives. It was really like, everyone's like, one, two, three, not it. And I was just like, huh? And then I was the person that was sort of nominated. So I went into it really confident because I knew that I was not in the wrong. I knew that I wasn't crazy. I knew that this had happened. I knew that they were breaking the law, that they were skirting around rules, that they were doing bad things. I had the evidence in my hand. And so for me, I was like, just hit the ground running, raring to go. I'm like, talk to me. Somebody talk to me. Somebody come over and take pictures of all this stuff. Help me out. And and I think so much of that in the very early stages was me just kind of trying to make sense of it. But when Washington State did a lawsuit against the company that I was a whistleblower for and had me be a witness, and I was deposed, and I got to really like just sit there, and it was all on Zoom because of COVID anyway. But to sit there and to tell my story and to talk to the lawyer and to have evidence and to help, like I I was excited. And when the documentary was coming out and they're like, we've got a release date, I was so excited. I was like, when can I tell everybody? So my story is so different from like the other side of the spectrum that I think because I was so confident and because I was so excited for people to finally see it, and it was so good and juicy. It was just this super cohesive story. It was like, we got him, you know. I was very, very excited. So I had a very different experience than Melissa.
The frog legs. That's what I always remember from that documentary. The frog legs, the frog leggings that smelled like frogs and stuff.
Oh my gosh, like the worst smelling stuff coming to me soaking wet and like full of mildew. There were bugs in bags. Like I was just like, oh, you guys are going down. Like I'm gonna make sure everybody knows that this is happening. And it was very cathartic.
I love that. I love that. So, knowing what you guys know now and ex having those experiences, what would you do to mentally prepare yourself if a documentary is coming out? Would you do a spa day, a trip? I feel like Melissa, you always do trips.
Yeah, just get out of the country. I'm like, okay, but I'm safe here. No one can find me. No, no, I travel. That's my release. This is such dark content, but I'm working with survivors that have, so much trauma and perpetrators, family members. I would say that, a lot of people don't find perpetrators' families to be sympathetic. And so I feel that I get the most hate in regards to that. And that's the most controversial, I would say, because I see perpetrators' families as secondary victims. They're not directly impacted by the perpetrator's crimes, but they have their own losses and grief that are separate and maybe not really understandable by the general public. I know what it feels like based on my own experience. Like right now, the case with the Idaho 4, the Brian Kohlberger case. What weighs on my mind is like his parents and his sisters. I have read reports that his sisters have like one of them, I don't know if this is true. This is just what I understood is that one of the sisters lost a job. I mean, obviously I'm not comparing their losses to the loss of life. I'm just saying that there's impacts outside and that nevertheless that they're in pain too and not in any way to compare. So I would say that when the documentaries come out and I work with perpetrators' families, they fear the fallout even more because they have jobs, they have lives, and here they are trying to hide so they can keep their job, so they can, have not this negative association with them. Because I mean, there's sayings like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or the most common thing that I hear is, how did you not know? And a lot of times the families of the perpetrators have a tremendous amount of sorrow and grief for the victims' families. And but yeah, I would say the greatest consequences are probably, as far as fallout, would be that. Although it does surprise me that survivors themselves and victims' families, they get shamed too. They're shamed with different statements like, oh, your sister was in a high-risk lifestyle, so if she wasn't a prostitute or a sex worker, then she wouldn't have met, her fate like that. So, I mean, I've heard the gamut of shameful statements from the public for all sides of people involved in cases like this.
The way that I prepared for the documentary to come out, I was house sitting for my friend up in the mountains, and I kind of took a little bit of time, and then when I came home, what we did is we kind of wanted to make it really fun because so many people had been following the story from that big Facebook group, and so many people on social media were like, I can't wait till this comes out. I can't wait to see it. I think we did like some AMA chats with people that had been in it because we were all friends. We did Clubhouse. Is Clubhouse still around? I think we did some Clubhouses and like some Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives. We did all kinds of stuff. The haters decided to take my TikTok account down like the night of the movie coming out. So that was really fun. And we ended up like going live on something else. And there's always something happening. So I think them getting my account banned for the night actually helped. And it was this fun thing where we're like, oh my gosh, we're number three, we're number two. Oh my God, we're number one. We're still number one. And we really kept it up and we really were there for everybody that had questions. There were tons of haters in the comments, lots of, people that were in multi-level marketing or who had had positive experiences and didn't want to look past any of that, who were trying to say that we were just isolated incidents and things like that. So again, that was fuel for me to have conversations, hard conversations with people who don't usually ever respond once you kind of drop like a like a really good comment. They kind of don't come back. But we had a really good time with it. We had a lot of events and a lot of um, I think we did a watch party with like a live chat with people in there and asked questions and had a really good time. When episodes come out on the podcast, because I try to put an episode out every Sunday with my survivors, I kind of just I let them know, hey, it's coming out. Some of them will take time off of social media if they have a more high profile story or they're a little more juicy. Some people just come on and say, I bought a lot of stuff, I lost a lot of money. But some people come out like whistleblowers and say, here's evidence of things that I've seen. And there can be backlash with things. We've had people who have come on before they have left their MLM who have been canceled, like on the podcast or been terminated and things. So I always let people know that those are possibilities to protect yourself, to protect your social media, put it on private for a couple days if you need to, make it so people can't comment, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Because ultimately, you're the person that's going to have to deal with the comments and the backlash and, if you can't not Google yourself, then maybe going to the mountains where there is no Wi-Fi is a good place for you to go for a few days to just let everything die down because the first couple days are when you're going to get the most coming at you. And if you're the kind of person that can't not look at the comments and can't not get emotionally heated or upset about that stuff, sometimes you just have to turn it off and just say, I couldn't see it even if I wanted to. I was in the middle of nowhere. Um, Now when episodes come out, I'm usually traveling or doing something fun and we're just kind of we'll record like housekeeping in a hotel room and just say like we're on location recording on the bed in a hotel somewhere and here's this episode and just try to have fun with it. I yeah.
And I would say to circle back on my comment about like just the backlash and the wave of attention could be really overwhelming. But the one thing that is a sure thing is that eventually that attention dissipates. So it's like a wave. So you get hit like the first, when the episodes come out, it's just really hot and heavy, and then it starts to subside and trickle out. And so if it's too much, if it's terrifying or you're getting so much hate that you don't know how to deal with it, just what the survivors that I've worked with, the family members that I've worked with, I just tell them just like hold on, keep off social media like a week, a little bit longer. I wish, Roberta, that we could cheer like count down. But I love Terra that you had Roberta and me on because we're like so opposite. It's great. It's great. Because it is so true. The content is so different. And so I love that you have us both on to show like the spectrum of what this could be.
That's why I did it. I was like, oh, serial family, family member. And then Roberta, MLM, different like white collar crime, like we got the murder, we got the white collar.
I
Yeah.
say that so often, like, because when we do, I say that what I do is true con and not true crime, because most of my stories end with people getting some sort of justice or some sort of answers or some sort of closure, whereas a lot of true crime, you don't get that. And so it's such a different spectrum to be like, turn everything off, go into hiding if you need to. I'll be like, have a watch party, do trivia, like So
Because
yeah,
it's a
it's
celebration
a,
of justice for
absolutely. Yeah, it
for
would be like watching a trial come to fruition and getting the verdict that you want and being like, "Woohoo, we're partying tonight."
yeah,
It's sort of that kind of vibe for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yes, yes. So let's go into talking about behind the scenes. So, Melissa, what are your perspective as a producer working with vulnerable stories? How do you help them kind of navigate that and, the pre, post, and then, filming and then post?
I would say a lot of it is lead up and it's about trust and about radical honesty, the good, the bad, the ugly. So, for example, for survivors, they've been blindsided. So you can't blindside with facts or surprises. Like, for instance, with my documentaries that I produce, at the end of the day, it's not the first time. They don't watch the documentary on air. They know what's airing before it airs. They've watched it most of the time. They've watched it. It also depends on policies with the networks that I work with. So, for example, with the life and murder of Nicole Brown Simpson in New York, I had her sisters sit in, with other producers. We all sat together and watched the 4 episodes together. And I watched their reactions because they don't know what it looks like and until they see it on the screen. And so then I have a chance to hear their feedback, like what they liked, what they didn't like, and if there's something really detrimental to fix it then. But before even that, before we even all watch it together, along the way, I would say, okay, I'm going to interview this person, this person, and this person. How do you feel about that? And then sometimes survivors don't like who I'm going to interview, and then I'll have to say, this is why I'm going to interview them. And there's a sense of balance that you have to have. You have to have all sides of the story, the whether you like, they like it or not, because the public demands, for it to not be biased. Because then otherwise, if I just did one strict POV, it would be a different type of situation. That would be really something more suitable for like Sundance or more privately funded. What I do is commercially funded. So to give kind of a breakdown of how this works in case, people watching don't know, how the first step for me is connecting with the survivor. And if they want their story told, like what Roberta said, is they'll come to her and ask, like, I want to be on your podcast. So sometimes they'll come to me and say, I really want to tell my story, or I go out and say, I think you should tell your story. I'm the one who outreaches sometimes. And then once that happens, then what needs to happen is I have to go get funding to tell this story. And I need a production partner that, is a business that has the editors, that has the directors, or like other people involved that could help produce it. And so from there, the first step with a survivor or a family member, whoever the storyteller is, that because of the investment of time and not per se money, the first contract is an attachment agreement. So they will sign something like, I'm giving you consent, to go and procure funding to help me tell my story. And B, that, like that I do want to tell my story. Because weirdly enough, a lot of producers are going to these networks and saying, I have so and so who wants to tell their story, and they never even talk to them. So it's really, really weird. It's really weird. And I've had other cases where um, somebody else has a talent attachment, and another person like from the UK or out of the country will go to the network and say they have the same rights that this company in the US has, but it's not true. So now networks are saying, show me this talent attachment to make sure that it's vetted that you could tell the story. So I don't know if I'm getting too much in the weeds of the business side, but like just those are the first steps. And so for survivors and storytellers, I would say that to really be mindful of who you're partnering up with, that they're going to be your champion. And I think it's just really important that I feel that it's really important that they tell you along the way, hey, this is what's happening and keep you informed, like as a guide. So I guess that's a long way of saying they should be your mentor, your guide through the process and telling you all the things bad, good, you know.
Yes,
I, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say 100%, Roberta.
As somebody who's on the other side of that, I absolutely super appreciate what Melissa is saying. When I was first approached by Storyforce, who did Lula Rich, we had like an email and then we had a phone call. It was like an hour-long phone call, and we just kind of talked, and I expressed all of my concerns and all of my red flags and all of my I would not do it if this is what it's going to be like. And they were super on board. They said, we want to have you sign something to be a consultant to help us get all of these other people attached. So I was a little more involved than other people in Lula Rich. I reached out to a lot of people who I knew had good stories that I thought needed to be told, and said, I think this would be really important. I was in a lot of calls, like intermediary in between. They're talking to the producers, then they're calling me, and we're kind of hashing it out. I was such a champion for all of the people that I knew that I had gotten attached, because I was like, if this is a flop and we all go under, like they're gonna be like, Roberta made me do this. So I was very like conscious of making sure that I asked a lot of questions and we were always in constant contact. I Googled every single person attached name, and I was like, what else did they do? And there were documentaries that I had watched that I had loved that I thought were fantastic. And I was like, oh my God, they did that. Oh, yeah, there's a check in the green box for me. And so I made sure that I did my due diligence, that I did my homework, that I double checked everything. And then I stayed in contact with all of the people that were attached and said, like, what's going on with you? When are they talking to you? We were all in contact. As soon as we get off the phone with somebody, be like, hey, they just said they're coming down. Oh yeah, they're interviewing me this day. We were always in contact. All of the talent, or whatever you want to call us, we're always in contact because we had been friends prior and had kind of gone through all of this. We were always in contact with all the different producers that they had on the show, the executive producers and like the story producers and everything, and making sure that everybody was on the same page. And then even through post, keeping up and saying, hey, how is everything going? Do we have a date? How am I portrayed? Is what's going on, like where's the story, and just having really good personal relationships with the producers, and them being like, well, don't tell anybody, but, and I'd be like, oh my God, really? And having this information and feeling better about it. I never ever left any of those conversations going, I don't know about this. Every single time I was like, oh my God, it's gonna be amazing. And like, if you're not feeling that way, because I have worked with other people who came and they're like, your story needs to be on a bigger platform, and then they were like totally weirdos, right? They send you a contract, and I'm like, the first thing I'm like searching for is like a non-compete clause. I'm like, why does this contract have a non-compete? I'm not signing this. Who are you? So I think it's really important to do your due diligence, which is something that I talk about on the podcast all the time anyway. But to know who you're working with, to know what they've done before, to see their work, and to know that they're open to answering any questions that you have and being really responsive to that was all a pro. Because there was another Lula documentary that came out that they wanted me to do, and I couldn't because I was doing Lula Rich. And the people that I talked to that ended up doing that one instead of Lula Rich were like, I wish I would have said yes to Lula Rich, because the other one was kind of a hot mess. The other one kind of got people that I was like, I wouldn't have interviewed that person, but okay. And they were two completely different experiences. When I talked to people that did the other one, they were like, it was not a great experience for me. So if you do not feel comfortable at any time, you say, I'm not comfortable. I don't feel comfortable doing this. If you are with a good team, they will talk you through it. They will say, what are your concerns? Let's talk about it. What will make you feel comfortable? This is what we can and can't do. Like, can we compromise, versus them getting upset with you or anything like that, which is a big, huge red flag. And again, what we talk about a lot. If you get a bad response, that is a huge red flag that you should step away.
100%. I would also say, going towards what you're saying, Roberta, about due diligence, um, get a lawyer. Get a lawyer. Like, I think that's the best advice is if you're doing like a big documentary, and I would say big documentary, well, even small, let's just get a lawyer to review your contract. Is intellectual property. So there's a lot of terms you're not going to understand. There's life rights. If you have a book, there's book rights. There's so many terms that you may not understand what they really mean. You could look at them at face value and be like, oh, that means that. But in reality, in intellectual property law, it can mean something completely different. And I could give an example for me, like an error that I made was that when I wrote Shattered Silence, which is the book that Happy Face is based off of, they had to secure the book rights. And when I signed that contract, it just had a vague clause back in 2008 and all rights, it said, and all rights, very vague. And I thought, oh, this is really simple. I understand it. There's no legalese, but all rights could mean so many things. So they interpreted the contract to mean they own my life rights. And so I had to pay my publisher from 2008 um, some money to get my rights so that I could actually make the series. But anywho, my point is get a lawyer because you might not understand intellectual property law. You probably don't if you're not a lawyer. Yeah. Yeah. And don't get a divorce attorney to look at your contract. Get an intellectual property lawyer to look at it, a media lawyer.
Yes,
Yeah.
entertainment lawyer for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So I think this is the perfect time to open up the floor to any questions people may have. Feel free to raise a hand or just ask.
Melissa, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jody, as you can see probably there on the screen. I sent you a TikTok message a few weeks ago when you were in Italy. Um, I've been reading Shattered Silence, and long story short, my dad is in OSP, where your dad resides, I believe.
Okay.
And he, 39 years ago, he murdered my grandmother, my mom's mom, and we had 3 arson house fires 2 weeks in a row, um, like every 6 days. And it led up to her death. And we lived with him for 7 years. I am in Washington State, and this happened in Oregon, in Monroe, Oregon. My dad was born in Monroe, Washington. And for those 7 years, we did not know it was him. The suspicion was out there that he was the most likely candidate, but we went to trial in 95. So it was 6 weeks long in Corvallis.
Okay.
And at that point, we were the longest case in Benton County history. But he got life without parole. But in the last 10 years of his sentence, because he had to do 30 years regardless, in the last 10 years, he could petition to apply for parole. And I lost my mom in 2019. And I think a lot of the stress from this is what took her in the end. I think she was just heartbroken, honestly. So I have all the trial papers, the documents, the fire, everything, the 911 call log. I have the crime scene photos. I have all of it. And my mom always wanted to write the book. She always wanted the movie made. She just, all those. But I think she was just terrified of reliving everything. I was 11 when it started. I was 16 when I had learned that he had done time in Shelton before I was born. And my now husband, we were dating at the time, and he came home and said that his dad had heard some rumors about my dad and blah, blah. Well, the valley was small. And, they were like, watch out for Bill. He's got some history. And, the rest of it just kind of played out and fell into place. The detectives knew in Oregon, they knew it was him. But, he sat in jail for 2 years before we went to trial. And then afterwards, he's, I saw him in 2019 towards the end of that year. And, he did the blame game, it was just awful. And then 2 years later, he applied again, and then he got granted 4 more years. So in January, he can apply again, and then we're going to have to go through all this again. So every 2 to 4 years, I have to face him and make sure he stays where he is. So, but he's been in there. It was 32 years on January 8th.
Wow. So I would love to connect with you. And for this forum, how could Roberta and I help you here and Tara?
I'm just not sure where to begin. I feel like there's so many different avenues. Like, where do you start? I ordered, it's Prime Day, and I ordered The Artist's Way after looking at it on your Instagram page.
Oh yeah.
So that arrives tomorrow. Um,
Yes, starting.
so
Okay. So if I understand your question is like where to start.
yeah,
I think like Roberta and I both probably could answer that. So I'll go first in the sense that you already have all the FOIA or the public records, about
yeah,
your case. So that's a start. And then I think you have to think about what resonates best for you, what medium. So is that podcasting? Is that a book, a longer format where you could really process the feelings and interview? Or is it a documentary is a little bit more difficult in the sense like you have to go and organize everything and then pitch it out and you're subject to somebody else's approval versus
yeah,
if you choose a book or a podcast, it's really in your own hands. You can create your own podcast and you can write or and self-publish your own book. I would say just knowing you from right now, and this is like something you're just like on a discovery journey,
yeah, very much.
I would probably advise you to start with the book.
Okay,
And
that's kind of what I was thinking.
yeah. And then
So
Roberta, you want to,
I mean, I agree with the book. I had a guest that just came on my show who was in Amway for a long time, most of his 20s, and
okay,
he started telling his story on TikTok in just short form, telling his story, answering questions,
okay.
responding to people in the comments, which led to like another post. And what he
I
realized,
just I just started a TikTok, so yeah.
yeah, what he
I've had Facebook and
realized.
Instagram for years, but TikTok was just never a platform I'm like, okay, maybe I need to.
It's great for short form storytelling. I mean, you can tell up to
Okay.
10-minute segments. So basically, what he realized was these little, 8 to 10 minute videos that he was making were chapters in a book that
Okay.
he did eventually write. So he was able to go, oh, that's a good story. I want to expand on that story. I want to expand on this. And based on like what people wanted to hear and what the questions people were asking,
Yeah.
was able to kind of create like a map to tell his story. And so much of the work was done because he was able to just get it out while speaking. I think a lot of times when you're talking to somebody or you're answering questions, you say a lot of things where you're like, actually, that was kind of smart, that
Right.
you won't necessarily get when you're sitting by yourself writing things down. So
Yeah.
if that's something, and then also having the followers who can ask you questions and you can share these things and you can get a little more intimate, those
Okay.
people are going to want to read your book. And so then you kind of also have this built-in following of people who are really excited for you when you do decide to publish or self-publish. And he's
Yeah.
self-published and he got his book out pretty quickly. I think it took him about a year from when he started telling his stories on TikTok until when he published
But
his book. But
how do you self-publish though?
I've never self-published, but I think there's all kinds of like you can Google and there's
And
all kinds of people that
Okay.
do it.
yes. And sorry to interrupt. We do have 2 minutes left, and then I have
Okay.
another live after this.
Okay.
Am.
we'll finish.
But I do have panel on YouTube about sharing your survivor story through writing, but Melissa also is putting together a great course for how to write a book proposal. You should check that out, connect with
There you
Melissa.
go.
And then if
Okay.
you're ever interested in podcasting, I do have a podcasting course that teaches you how to put together a podcast yourself where you own it completely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Melissa. I'll wait for you to reach out to me because
Okay,
it
I'll
only
find
allows
you.
you to send one message.
Oh, I didn't know. I'll find you.
And I follow you on Instagram, but yeah.
Okay,
You,
perfect.
thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
So,
you.
Thanks, Joey.
and then Dr. Gigi, did you have one last question we can answer real quick?
Yes, just about Happy Face. I just want to hear a little bit more about Happy Face. I am an author myself as well, and I'm an advocate for a lot of subjects as well that we talked about. As far as I'm a domestic violence survivor and advocate, and also for sexual assault as well. And I have written a true crime book as well. It just came out, The Miracle Through the Storm: The Infinite Power of Faith. So I do understand, is my point. And I do have other friends as well who've been through something similar as you all. So bless your souls for coming forward and sharing what you're sharing. I know it's not easy, so thank you. But Melissa, yes, please tell me more about Happy Face.
What do you want to know? Exactly. There's so much. I mean, where could I go with it?
Yeah,
The
no,
show's great.
I know, right? That's such a general question, but I guess the purpose behind Happy Face. What inspired you to write Happy Face?
Really, so one of the things that I love about the scripted medium versus documentary medium is that there are stories where I wanted to protect people that want to be anonymous, that didn't want to come forward. So in the documentary space, your documentary is only as solid as the people who have the courage to come forward and speak. And I mean this in the most respectful way, like if you have a gap where like somebody could really have a voice to say like this happened or that, and you don't have that storyteller to fill, to corroborate or whatnot. But what I wanted to do is share behind the scenes. Like I didn't have a reality show, so I could show like the conversations, the dialogue, the stigma through writing, then versus like trying to find people who would, say it in real life. So like there's scenes there that are inspired by true events that happen, real things that happen, real conversations that happen, but these people would never come forward and say that. And so this was a way of protecting their identity, and sharing the ripple effect of what true crime does to victims and family members, et cetera. So I mean, I'm trying to be fast, sorry, because we have like one
You're
minute.
good. I know.
I'm
Thank you,
like
Melissa.
speed talking, and then.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope that answered. Okay.
It did. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I say
Okay.
quick?
Sure. I just have 1 minute left.
I just wanted to say that I really love this. This was really great, but and I know you're short on time, so I wanted to say that I was going to reach out via DM on Instagram with my questions for each of you, Melissa, Roberta, Terra.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm on Instagram. My account is my activism account is amplified voice healing, and I've been very involved with Callisto. I don't know if you've heard of Callisto, and also I have been testifying in Connecticut and Massachusetts in support of Victoria Burke's Speak Your Truth Act, which I'm sure you all have probably heard about. I spoke at the State House in Massachusetts on June 17th, so that's working its way through the legislative in Massachusetts, and it just passed last month. It was signed into law by Governor Lamont in Connecticut, and Oregon signed it into law recently, and Maine and California was the first state that Victoria got it passed in 2023, and then she started pushing it nationwide. And I connected with Victoria via Instagram, and I've been communicating with her closely, and she's amazing too, if you guys aren't already following her.
Congratulations.
And
That's
Callisto.
great.
And when I reach out via Instagram, I can tell you a little bit about my story.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I want to answer everyone's questions, but thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Roberta, so much for being panelists. Everyone go follow them and check them out on social media, listen to their podcasts and all the documentaries that they are in. So until next time, I'm Terra Newell, and thank you so much for watching.